And perfect timing. All right, so my capstone project is about at-risk students here at Ignite. So the question that I decided on to try to answer is, how are at-risk students at Ignite performing compared to their peers? And why did I get to that? So we started the process with just general wonderings. What are you interested in? What do you think about what, in your educational practice? And my passion, one of them in education, is working with at-risk students. That goes back to my time starting my teaching career, teaching in jails in Grant and Kenton County, and then started with Boone County at the alternative school. And then I'm also on some regional and district committees for this, the Ready and Resilient by Design and the Youth Mental Health Task Force for the Boone County District. And then, so why is that also important here at Ignite? We were designed as a program that's an alternative to traditional schools. And so therefore we get a different type of student here. Some students, and I've got some evidence of this that I'll show you in a bit, they choose Ignite not necessarily because they want to be a designer or an engineer or a teacher, but because they are trying to get away from something else. And of course, just where we are, in the state, we have a lot of people who fall under the at-risk category in general, and since we draw from those other schools. And then also, when schools are evaluated by the state and stuff, they look at the gap groups, who's not just what are your top students doing, but what's the gap between them and the bottom. So that's why I decided to focus on these students. So most of this stuff on the Ignite side as far as what we are as a school. So I won't go through that with you. Most of the data that I'm going to show you, I limited to the design college, just for ease of gathering data. That's what I had access to. So we have a few more students, but and not only that, it's design students that I have in class. So that also eliminates a few extras. So that gave us 117 students that I looked at. Of those 117, we have just an astonishing 39 students who are identified as gifted and talented in design. Now, a number of those are art and creativity, gifted nonetheless. We are heavily female here in the design college, 87-30, female to male breakdown. We have 23 students who are minorities. We have 27 who receive free and reduced lunch. And then we have 14 who currently receive services under an IEP or a 504. So those are the students that we're looking at when I look at the data. So to define the inquiry, and how am I going to define, so the question was, how are at-risk students performing? So we need to define what an at-risk student is and what is their performance. So I use these three categories. Do they receive free and reduced lunch to handle like low socioeconomic status? Do they have an IEP or a 504 to receive services? And then also looked at minorities as well. And to discover how they were performing, I decided to focus on reading and search scores. So we looked at reading and composite search scores, and I focused on reading for a number of reasons, and its importance, especially here at Ignite, because you need that to get into dual credit classes. You need that to be able to succeed once you are in the dual credit classes, of course, to use college level texts. We have a lot of self-directed learning styles. Some teachers using the flipped classroom where the students have to read the material and be familiar with it when they come back to class. And then students on Edgenuity where that's self-driven as well. So all those things make reading, it's important in every educational setting, but I feel like because of that, it's even more important here. All right, so I gave a student survey to my students and a few things that I want to point out as a result of that survey. So I asked them why they chose to come to Ignite. As I mentioned earlier, just under half of them said that they came to the Design College at Ignite to become a designer. So 48%. Another 12, almost 13% said that they came to have the opportunity to take dual credit classes. So those two things I think are what we assume, right? From the outside looking in, of course, you would think those are the main features here at Ignite. This is why kids come here. We also had about 10% who admitted to us they came here because they didn't like something at their old school. I also had 22% who said other. And I feel like if it was for the design college or for dual credit, they would have said that. So I'm thinking that those 22% are something else besides that. So what other reason? I wasn't able to dig any further, but I think those probably fall into more of the other reasons than what we would expect reasons to come to Ignite. What's that? The building is cool, yes. So that's about 5%. I mean, we know that, right? Because when we had eighth graders tour the building, we had a huge 1,000-long waiting list. When we didn't have eighth graders tour the building, we couldn't get it right. We had to extend our application period. So I think more of them would, what in the heck did I just do there? Anybody know what just happened? Said you could start over. I don't want to start over. Oh, goodness. Yeah. Here we go. We're back. Okay. So, yeah, I think it's probably higher than that, really, because of that information. That could be a trend. Yep. Yeah, I did say that. So that's a small sliver there. That's the orange one. Or, yeah, colors are different on the screen than on my computer. Okay. Okay, so then I also asked them, how comfortable are they with speaking to their teachers? Because I think that has to do with, what makes them successful here. And so I know this is a little distorted. I was trying to make the graphs look right next to one another, and I'll explain that. So how comfortable are you talking to your teachers about school-related things? So 70% fall into the top two categories here. So I think that's a great indication that most students are very comfortable talking to the teachers here. No student said that they are not comfortable at all talking to teachers about school-related things. When it comes to talking to their teachers about non-school related things, dropped a little bit. So we had 12 who said basically not at all, and only 6 who said extremely. But I still think it's a pretty good split. I think that would, I don't know, I can't compare that, but I would think that would be lower at other places. So I think overall we can take from that students are comfortable talking to the teachers here. Okay, so here's some of the data, some of the numbers. And this page is, I think, to be expected. So I looked at this reading scores and composite scores. And so if you compare just the students who receive free and reduced lunch and compare it to other students who do not receive free and reduced lunch, with, again, this is just design college, their average search score was a 17 compared to a 20. And if you kind of look, most of them are in that 2-point range, right? Where the at-risk group is roughly 2-3 points below. The exception there would be the minorities, where they, on reading were basically the same and almost the same when it comes to the composite scores as well. But so our two at-risk groups, when you just look at their scores, they did come in about 2 points lower on average in the design college. I think that, again, is something to be expected. That's why they're called the at-risk groups. This next page is what was surprising to me and what I saw as a positive thing for us. So I looked at change in search scores in both reading and composite from the first time they took it in the fall to some students, this was the winter, some it was the spring, depending on what data I had access to. So we looked at their percent change. And in reading, all the at-risk groups went up, especially the group that gets services through IEPs and 504s, where when you take those groups out, the rest of the students actually went down by 1% in reading. Now, I know we've seen data where we went up in reading as a school. So this for a moment was confusing to me, but I think that, remember, this is just the design college. So I think if we look, that's where the discrepancy is. We know reading went up as a school, but I think in design it went down. But great news for the at-risk groups, right? Same thing with the composite. It's a little bit fuzzier as far as the data goes. For the free and reduced lunch group, the other students actually did improve more. But again, if you look at the improvement with the IEP and 504 students, they improved by 10%, whereas the rest of the college only improved by 5%. And again, the minorities stayed the same as far as their composite scores. So next, I want to just talk about some of the certain things that we do and what could be causing these numbers, right? So some of the services that we provide for these different groups, for low socioeconomic status students, we provide Chromebooks. Currently, we have 75 Chromebooks loaned out. Now, these numbers are school-wide, not just design, but we've had as many as 180 throughout the entire year. So that's helpful to those families. Suzanne Hemingway also works with the Care Closet, Go Pantry, and Master Provisions. And she said that we have 10 families that basically take advantage of those services. One thing I don't know that I would be interested to find out is, do we have 10 families? We have way more than, we have way more students, families than that could probably benefit from that. Is it 10 families because that's all we have to give out and we've maxed out? Or is it just because, those families don't know about it, or there's an outreach, a communication piece that we're missing?
That's exactly right. And what I can say about that is that we had boxes of food at Thanksgiving that we couldn't give out, right? Because we didn't know the students, and it's a very difficult topic. You don't want to approach a student and say, "Hey, you're going to need we've got some food we can give," because it could be offensive to them or we need some help. So that's a really good point in this meeting. You may want to mention in your next college content meeting if you have scholars that are at risk or not at risk. Excuse me, scholars that they feel like can use some help. Send the name to Suzanne and she will reach out to them to sort of get that.
Yeah.
Good point there.
So the other thing, kind of a similar situation, like, free lunch. Now, I talked about the number of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. Obviously, right now, everybody's getting free lunch. So I got the numbers from the cafeteria, and on an average day, we're giving away about 300 lunches. So if our enrollment is over 900, we have some students at home, and so that number is lower than I expected for the people in the building actually eating a lunch. What I was really interested in finding out was, while we were on NTI and things, and or even just 2 days a week, and we were giving away bags of food to take home, I have been really interested to find that out and how many were taking advantage of that. The issue is, and this is speaking to Sarah in the cafeteria, is that we don't know because so many of those people got their services from their homeschool. So we had the options here, but it was probably closer and easier for kids to get stuff, or they have a student, they have a sibling at another school or whatever. So we didn't give away as many as most other schools did just because of that. But all those services for those low socioeconomic students. Pretty straightforward services that we provide for students with IEPs and 504s. Modifying assignments as according to the IEP. Some of the most common accommodations, as you all know, extra time on assignments, in-class tests and standardized tests, quiet environment, preferential seating, and given a reader when necessary. And again, based on what we saw with the data and those students improving at the highest rate, those are our special ed department and teachers dealing with 504s and counselors seem to be doing a great job with that. We don't really have any services specifically aimed at minorities unless they're also an English language learner, where we do have services for those students. So I'm going to take this opportunity to address two elephants in the room as far as what I wanted to do and wasn't able to do. One is this is a pandemic and a weird year, so data is going to probably be a little skewed. And partly because of that, I was really hoping to get resiliency poll data because I wanted to look at, we know, especially here in design, but across the board, we have a lot of students that would claim mental health issues, anxiety, and things like that, that do not receive services through a 504 or an IEP. So I wanted to be able to identify some of those students and do some of the same like CERT analysis, but we just didn't get that in time. But I did want to list, we do have a lot of services available for those students. Between our counselors, we have school psychologists that come in, we have North Key counselors, and then as we've seen through Justin's report and some of my data as well, a lot of success through mentor programs as well. All right, so the conclusions I draw here are pretty basic. As expected, the at-risk students perform slightly lower, 2 points on average or so on CERT when it comes to reading and composite scores. However, over the course of this year, the at-risk groups have improved more. So we are closing the gap, which is what we want to be doing, which tells me that some things we are doing here at Ignite for those at-risk students are successful in helping them close the gap. So questions and next steps, and some of this I've already talked about. So the next thing I would want to look at is, how does this compare across colleges? Is this similar across the other colleges? And then if we look at it school-wide, what would it tell us? And if that data is telling us that we are doing a good job with these at-risk groups, that they are improving at a higher rate, what specifically are we doing that we could replicate and improve on and expand on to help them even more? Again, I would want to get into the resiliency poll and see that information. What impact did NTI and virtual and all this have on students and the data this year? And then kind of looking forward, also when we really implement the MTSS, how is that going to affect students as well? Because I think that'll be another support for students who need extra support. Questions? Straightforward, I know. Not a lot. Okay. Well, then, if really no questions, what I would ask then is if you could go to tinyurl.com/smithscapstone and just give me a little feedback on that. That would be awesome. Yep, tinyurl.com. I think that should work. Let me know if that doesn't work. It does. Okay. So my students' fourth period, in my dual credit students, I had this open and they were asking me what it is. So I basically did a practice run through with them, and they said, "Well, you didn't thank us for watching your presentation, so you lose points on your YLP for that. So I thank you for listening to my presentation, so that the students don't mark me down." And that's all.